someone called and said, is Pokemon demonic?
The answer to that is yes, they are all Oriental demons.
Yeah.
And as you read in the Pokemon, in order for Pokemon to advance in power, it has to evolve to another level. And each, evolution, he becomes more demonic in appearance. And eventually he gets to a point where he's totally demonic.
So Pokemon is a game that teaches children how to enter into the world of witchcraft, how to cast spells, how to use psychic phenomena, how to put to work supernatural powers against their enemies, how to fantasy role play. Pokemon world is a world of the demonic, of the satanic.
So what exactly is a Pokemon? Cute, cuddly characters who become supercharged so they can fight their enemies. But some experts say the entire Pokemon phenomenon is the enemy.
In my opinion, parents should not let their kids watch Pokemon, play Pokemon, buy Pokemon cards, have anything whatsoever to do with Pokemon, because the message is violence.
Hello everyone, this is Jasmine. It's been a while. Sorry about that. This video isn't something I'm familiar with making. What I mean by that is this is more of a video essay, research heavy approach with the topic. So it's taken some time to gather the research and write everything down because I really wanted to be as thorough as possible. Now, normally I talk about art and normally I open up a Pokemon single pack. I pick out the rare, get the dog breed from the generator, and combine the two to create a Pokédog illustration. But since there is a lot to discuss, I want to minimize distractions and get started. The Pokemon anime came out in the US in 1998, and the rest, as we all know, is history. It was a massive hit. Today, it's the highest grossing media franchise of all time, earning on average $4 billion a year. Now, I was about 7 years old when Pokemon Fever hit the nation, and I was on board with it. I collected the toys, watched the show, and I was really into the idea of playing the card game, but everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. My mom, being the ultra-conservative Christian woman, started listening and following the teachings and beliefs of another phenomenon of demonizing Pokemon. I remember being in the car and my mom tuning into radio stations that would discuss the evils of Pokemon, and even remember glimpses of my mom and grandma watching random late-night Christian channels because we didn't actually have cable, claiming demons guised as these cute pocket monsters are being summoned like Satan summons his minions. I was uncomfortable and really a little frightened during this time. This all built up to my mom confronting me with a black trash bag. Either she was going to toss out my Pokemon toys or I was. So through tears and pleas for a change of heart, I tossed out all of my stuff, and ever since then, anything related to Pokemon was banned. Now, in my first video titled My Pokemon Story, I briefly talked about this, but I wanted to do a deeper dive into the phenomenon known as the Pokemon Satanic Panic. I wanted to do this for a few reasons. One, I believe everyone deserves to express themselves. Having Pokemon taken away from me was honestly a scarring moment for me as a kid because I was not able to have control over something as simple as what television show I could watch. I felt ashamed for liking something every kid was obsessed with. Living without Pokemon, it isn't the worst thing that can happen to a child, but it does showcase a bigger problem of a parent-child relationship when the child's personal interests are disregarded. And two, moral panics, how do they even happen? So a moral panic is defined as a feeling of fear spread among many people that some evil threatens the well-being of society. It is the process of arousing social social concern over an issue, usually the work of moral entrepreneurs and the mass media, which describes exactly what happened in the case of Pokemon. So now that we know what defines a moral panic, for the rest of the video I'll be going over the steps that leads to said panic and the 7 social identities that are targeted in said panics. Most of the information I found regarding moral panics come from a journal study called Folk Devils and Moral Panics by Stanley Cohen. You could just type in this title, read the whole study online. It's really not much of a read. It's actually pretty decent. Like, you could just sit down for an hour and probably read the whole thing. Really easy. Anyways, he stated in his opening explaining the first edition of the study reflected social views of the 60s. The second was the 80s. And in the third, it wasn't really clear if it was just the 90s or if it's like current, but either way, it's very relevant to the last couple of decades. Okay, so there are 4 steps that lead to a moral panic. Number 1, someone or something is defined as a threat to values or interests, ergo Pokemon. Number 2, this threat is depicted in an easily recognizable form by the media. I guess I would say either the Pokeball or Pikachu, and Pikachu is the mascot of Pokemon, so there we go. Number 3, there is a rapid buildup of public concern, like just the many cases churches and schools and mothers would be telling stories to each other, such as school fights, delinquency, just occult messaging, these little inner circles just building up the myth that Pokemon is evil. And then number 4, there is a response from authorities or opinion makers. So again, with Pokemon, the news media, psychiatrists, and other different authorities were definitely found in various news clips, articles, journal studies, corroborating that Pokemon is in fact bad for children. So now that we know what leads to a panic, I want to discuss the common targets or scapegoats people usually find themselves blaming and panicking over. And that's what Cohen describes as the 7 identities. And I won't elaborate and give examples to every identifier, otherwise this will be an insanely long video. But I'll also want to keep the focus on how Pokemon found itself in many of these identifiers. And honestly, some of these topics are very dark and I don't want to dwell too much on it. Okay, so the scapegoats fueling the panic, or like I said before, the 7 social identities, is number 1, young working class violent males. Examples of this would be boarding hooligans, muggers, vandals, loiterers, joyriders, basically delinquents. A real-life media panic regarding a fear of young violent males was the Jamie Bulger story, and I do apologize if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. On February 12th, 1993, Robert Thompson and John Venables, 2 10-year-old boys from Liverpool, lured 2-year-old boy Jamie Bulger away from a shopping center onto some nearby train tracks and violently murdered him. This immediately sparked a ferocious moral panic nationally, as the story became a symbol of youth violence and the immoral variables that shaped them: television, music, video games, etc. Social scientists called these violent young males the Superpredator due to the surge in youth violence during that time in the 1990s. It was predicted that the future would be pretty scary, with younger children committing acts of violent crimes with no empathy, no conscience, and no morals. Reality proved otherwise, as when the 90s passed, crimes overall lowered. However, the myth of the Superpredator was solidified in many people's minds. The damage that this caused was the placement of unfounded blame and took away the attention from the victim and the proper punishment of the offenders. There's actually a short 10-minute video I will link below called The Superpredator Scare by the New York Times. It discusses the phenomenon in more detail, and I highly suggest you guys take a look at that. Going back to the damages that the scare caused, for example, in the case of Jamie Bulger, during the trial, a judge made a remark stating that, "I suspect exposure to violent video games may in part be an explanation," that which was considered a serious fact. And news started circulating that one of the offender's fathers rented the video Child Play 3 and claiming that the film had parallels to the murder of the little boy. The panic turned on the media violence, so it turned on film and violence in film, if you get what I'm saying. There were public burnings of like horror movies. Reports claimed that Child's Play had been removed from video shops, but 4 months later it was brought up by the police and was revealed that checks on the family's homes and rental lists showed that neither Child's Play or anything like that has been viewed. So it really was a waste of reaction and just pretty much took blame away from the offenders and just the severity of the situation in itself. Number 2, school violence, bullying, and shootouts. There have been many outcries in the media about school violence and related problems such as, like I said before, school shootings, playing dangerous macho games, which in my school was this dumb game called Bloody Knuckles, where kids would punch each other's fists in a game of dangerous chicken to see who can withstand pain more. Displaying weapons, drug pushers, and gambling, which oddly enough, the Pokemon TCG for many schools was considered a form of gambling due to some of the cases of children losing their prized card or even their entire 150 card collection in a lost match.
Many school officials think the craze has gone too far.
They're not allowed at our school because it's such a craze and people like them so much they tend to steal.
School officials are finding that Pokemon cards are responsible for fistfights, and the constant trading is not only distracting kids from classwork, but turning the playground into a black market where they buy and sell rare cards.
And as a result, many schools banned Pokemon altogether. Number 3, wrong drugs used by wrong people at wrong places. So these are the news coverages that you see plastered everywhere that this could be your kid, this could be the girl next door, this could be someone you love that falls under the spell of the new drug that's at parties that are found in raves and clubs and all the youth are using it. And yeah, I'm not gonna go into it that much because it doesn't pertain to Pokemon. Number 4, child abuse, satanic rituals, and pedophile registers. I'm gonna link down below a case that encapsulates the fears of satanic rituals and child abuse. It was the McMartin preschool case. This case happened in 1984 where news reports started to flood in stating that hundreds of children had been abused in this preschool, which was all false. And just even saying those statements, it just immediately spread panic across the nation. This particular indicator is it's a very dangerous moral panic to fall under because innocent lives are at stake, the mental state of the children involved are at stake. A lot in this particular case, there was false implantations of things that never happened to them, and that's incredibly scarring. I can't even imagine. Like I said, I believe that this particular moral panic is very dangerous because with a case as serious as this and as sensitive as it is, a lot of the police work, a lot of the people that are supposed to be advocating for these children are doing sloppy work. The therapists, the law enforcement, anybody else who's, involved in it is not doing the topic justice. Number 5, sex, violence, and blaming the media. It's a good thing that I don't have if I can't even say it, maybe I don't even deserve it. Monetization options. It's a good thing I don't have that option because I'm so new on YouTube, but if I did, it would not be monetized, that's for sure. Anyways, number 5, sex, violence, and blaming the media. There's this long history of potential harmful effects of exposure to pop culture and media. Examples are comics, cartoons, popular theater, cinema, rock music, computer games, internet porn, and yes, Pokemon. It's a very predictable identifier. Usually the trend of this panic is fixated on the latest media fad and immediately relegates older media to the shadows of acceptance. I believe demonizing Pokemon stems from, honestly, ignorance of the Asian culture.
These are all Oriental demons. The names are actually names of demons.
I'll tell you all, be careful what you let your kids have, what you let them listen to.
anime being a fairly new animation form in the West, and being that Pokemon was such an obsession with youth that debatably impeached on Christian values, because you can't be praising the Lord when you are collecting the Pokemon. Number 6, welfare cheats and single mothers. Honestly, every single topic, I could make a whole video surrounding a moral panic against that, and the cases that encapsulated the fears. It's very interesting, very sad, but my goodness, I know I have to just gloss over this one because this video, I feel, is already becoming a much longer form. And the last social identifier is number 7, refugees and asylum seekers flooding our country, swamping our services. And all I can say about that is yikes. And then, even though that was the last one, I would like to add my own social identifier, something that's, I feel, is the most current social fear, and that is technology, terrorism, and security privacy. Or yes, Pokemon Go. Believe it or not, 2016, when the Pokemon Go app was released for the US, it's like these crazies that were fearful of Pokemon just woke up from a slumber and they have a new thing to blame for their social fears. I'm gonna link a very interesting podcast below that talks about the fears of Pokemon Go and what potentially it could mean to our country if we allow such an app to exist. So in the podcast, these two guys are talking about Pokemon Go, and the story is they were really suspicious about this grown man kind of walking around, putting up his phone, and just looking suspicious in their eyes. Police come, turns out all he was doing was playing Pokemon Go. It got their little crazy brains thinking, wait a minute, what if this technology of Pokemon Go, which is obviously augmented, it's an augmented game where you're looking at real life, but Pokemon are just plopped in there. What if this technology was in the wrong hands, like extremists, and they're able to find out where Christians live and target us that way? I can't make this stuff up. This is the kind of stuff that I had to deal with living in a very religious household. Yeah, check it out. With everything I mentioned up to this point, I have to say it's been a little therapeutic and has given me insight as how and why people involve themselves into these crazes. It gives me a little closure and makes me realize Pokemon was never really a major target, but more a symptom to amplify a greater fear of occult messages in media and youth violence. In retrospect, this was a very bizarre phenomenon of the decade, and one most can easily poke fun of, and I do it too. I love me some songified version of Pokemon Power. However, I also look at this with caution. If something as fun-spirited and childish as Pokemon can be, what other harmless target can be propped up to spew a message of fear? Things like the McMartin case, campaigns spouting lies, demonizing certain people to build a narrative. They affect lives in devastating ways, and I'm just lucky I was only told Pokemon was evil, and that was the only panic I could say I was swept up in. It makes me aware that these moral panics can happen anytime, and to be just more aware and withhold reaction and passing judgment initially until the right information is out, and to just think rationally. I think that's good practice for everyone. It would give the best chance of not falling for a moral panic. Thank you everyone if you watched this whole video. I appreciate every view. This was a very interesting video to make. Who would have thought Pokemon would be involved in such a bigger social issue, right? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed yourself as well. Make sure to check this drawing out as well as other unseen artwork on my Instagram at Pokedogs, and take care.
Pokemon, witchcraft, Pokemon.